Hi, everyone. Today we are going to be talking once again about one of the rums from the Rumaniacs section. And if you recall the introduction that I made not too long ago, the Rumaniacs are a series of rums. It's just our designation, or my designation at this point, of rums that are old, out of production, predate probably the 1960s or 1970s or whatever. There's anything that's old that comes from a company that no longer makes it, where the company itself is probably not in existence any longer. Any one of those can qualify as a Romaniacs rum. It's entirely up to me. I mean, I've had one from 2002, I think it was, that I know isn't being made anymore. The point of the Romaniacs, though, is to help people get an understanding of how far back rum goes and what were some of the companies that were making them back in the day. What I find more and more often is happening is that people are saying, "Hey, listen, Lance, dude, I got gifted this rum by my great grandfather who had it in his basement, and he never opened it. He picked it up in the Caribbean on one of his maritime sojourns back in the 19 whatevers it was. Can you tell me anything about it?" And I find that fascinating because, of course, there's so few of these still running around, but there are some. Now, there are a lot of books out there that help you talk about rums and their production methods and the estates that make them, the countries that make them, the companies that make them, the distilleries that make them, all sorts of really fascinating details. And this goes all the way back to 1997's Rums of the Eastern Caribbean, which Ed Hamilton wrote. And that was followed by David Room's book Rum. It was followed by the Cates book Rum Curious, Minix, sorry. It was followed by works by Wayne Curtis, by Luca Gargano, who wrote Atlas du Rhum. It was also by Matt Petrix, who wrote, of course, Modern Caribbean Rum, which is like a magnum opus, if you ask me, and it should really be called Volume 1 because it just concentrated on the Caribbean, you know. But here's the thing. What it doesn't do, none of these books really do, is tell you about individual bottles. And these are the questions I get the most often, and that are often the very hardest ones to answer because so little information is out there for these companies that have long since gone out of business. A very good example is what I'm talking about today, and that's the photograph here about a produce of Jamaica, Blue Mountain finest old liqueur Jamaican rum by, well, who the fuck knows? I don't know, because when I found this at the Berlin Rum Festival, the label was torn off of the bottom. And that meant that the strength was unknown and the company was unknown. But I do have a few resources of my own. I do have a number of websites that I consult for stuff like that. I did image searches, word searches, all sorts of things. And I found out that it's very likely, because I found a label that was like literally 99% the same as this one, that it was made by a company called Edward Young and Company. Now, Edward Young and Company is a very, very old company. It is still on some labels of rums existing to this day. And I'll talk about that in a bit because I really find that quite fascinating. But they were apparently founded in 1797 by a guy called, well, Edward Young. Unfortunately, there's so little information about this company, and believe me, I tried my best, but nothing. The only thing I know is that it was formally registered as a company in 1885 or thereabouts, and then it went out of business around 1986. I have no idea whether it still exists. There are companies by that name still extant, but they do something completely different, and it's certainly not in the brandy, wine, and liquor distribution, which is what this company started out. Essentially, they were merchant bottlers, of which we know quite a few. So they produced this rum somewhere around, according to the handwritten notes on the auction booth that I went at the German Rum Festival in 2024, that it was 1930s, 1940s. Now, that's entirely possible. I do believe 1930s may be a bit of a stretch. I could definitively trace one bottle of this kind of thing to 1947, when the budget of that year changed the pricing of it. So I think 1940s is just about right. 1930s might be a bit of a stretch, but okay, whatever it is. Beyond that, the strength. Now, the photograph that I found of a label, of an uncorrupted label, if you will, was 70 degrees proof, which of course makes it pre-1970s immediately, because it's after that the percent ABV became a standard. 70 degrees proof is actually 40%. And beyond that, we don't know anything about the distillery in Jamaica that produced it. Not surprising. There were lots more distilleries back then. They were usually sending their stuff to the UK for blending. And because multiple distilleries used to be put together into a single batch or bottle or whatever, the idea that we could figure out absolutely without question what it is, yeah, no, we're not going to get anywhere near that, right? You could say it was JRA. They were the biggest ones doing that stuff at the time, but there's no evidence for that whatsoever. We just have to take it as a Jamaican rum, and perhaps we can take something off the taste of it, right? Beyond that, there isn't really much more I can tell you, aside from the fact that this is actually a very pricey rum if you can still find it. Rum Auctioneer had this thing once. Whiskey Auction had it another time for £470 and £310 respectively. There is a company that specializes in old out of production rums that they sell, and they were advertising this a year or two back for about $2,700 US. It's hard to tell. I guess it comes down to what anybody's willing to pay for it, right? I don't know how old it is either. I don't know what kind of still made it. Nothing. So that's what we got to go with it. Okay. So here's the thing. Even taking into account this kind of lack of provenance and relatively mild strength, I always thought, and I've tried this 2 or 3 times now, kind of like filched a sample, right? This thing is really quite a lovely rum. It doesn't actually scream Jamaica. It doesn't have that modern high ester, funky kind of notes to it. It doesn't have that. It's a perfectly serviceable rum, really nice to taste. It opens up with nose of fleshy fruits. We're talking about peaches, apricots, orange peel, tangerines. There's a little bit of salt, a little bit of leather, plastic, olives, rubber, and it's nice. It really is quite good for 40%. And I tried this at the end of a rum festival when I was kind of like really had a lot of rum that day. That I was able to get that much out of it speaks a lot for its quality. Now, how it tastes. That's not bad. Now, it is a bit thin and it is a bit underpowered. 40%, you can't get away from that, I'm afraid. There are very few rums that are going to be pungent on top of, with that kind of mild strength. But it has many of the same notes as the nose does. So we've got oranges, we've got candies, flowers, some plastic, a little bit of rubbing alcohol. It's a bit salty, slightly sweet, some leather, some smoke, a touch of bitterness from tannin, so it has been aged a bit. Vanilla from the barrel, of course. Nothing untoward, with a really quite short finish. But what is nice about it is that it's clean, it's crisp, it's definitive. It really, what little flavors you do get out of it are actually quite nice. So on that basis, I'm not really sure a score would matter to you, given the fact that, you're very unlikely to find this in the wild anymore. And of course, you can't tell what distillery it's from. There's just too much generalization about it that I really couldn't tell you whether it was Long Pond or any of the others that existed back in the day. But it is really nice, and I liked it enough that in the Rumaniacs review that's going to accompany this video, I'm going to give it 87 points. Now, I know I'm already approaching 8 minutes in this review, and I'm talking really fast, but there is one other thing I want to mention, and that is one of my favorite Canadian rums is a basic brown mixer called Young's Old Sam. Now, Young's Old Sam is nothing special, right? It is a 40% rum. Nowadays, it's being made completely in Guyana. It is shipped to the Newfoundland Liquor Corporation, and they blend it and bottle it in Newfoundland and distribute it to the rest of the country. Except that if you look at the bottle, Edward Young was the originator of that brand. And who Old Sam was has been an issue that has created some issues around 2020, 2021, when they started to remove the drawing of the guy because they felt that, in the Black Lives Matter movement, it was considered to be offensive. There were other people who said it didn't look anything like a black chap. So what is it, right? But be that as it may, it's been removed. But what has remained is the founding of the company, 1797, the fact that it came from Edward Young. And I guess since the Newfoundland Liquor Corporation took it in 1999, they've simply switched it from whatever it was being made of then to 100% Guyanese stocks. It really did come from Edward Young, and that means that they were actually a much bigger deal than we think otherwise. Simply because all we managed to find is a Jamaican doesn't actually mean that that's all they did. They seem to have been able to get stocks from all over the world. So I wanted to leave you with that there is a through line from all the way from the 18th century right through to the 21st, where a single company who doesn't even exist anymore still has its name on a label and is there. And probably most people don't know anything about this. And if there's any reason for the Rumaniacs to exist, it is because this kind of information is so useful to people who are interested in the subject. So if you know anything else about a rum like this, or this particular one, by all means, please get a hold of me and let me know, because I'd love to put more into this kind of review, even if it's in a show note than anything else. But for the moment, I think this is a really cute kind of little Jamaican rum. It was made a long time ago. It's like, what, 80 years old now? Something like that. It's amazing that it still presents so well. And I'm really glad I got a chance to try it, and there will be more to come. So that's it for now, and I hope you have a very nice day. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.